How do you win the Heisman Trophy? On the surface, it seems obvious. You have to play really freaking good football. You've got to be one of the best players in the country. You have to make great plays on a consistent basis week in and week out, and you've got to do it at the highest level. However, you also have to make people aware that you exist, which might not always be the easiest thing to do. If you're putting up great numbers, but you're playing at a smaller school that does not get a ton of exposure or a ton of TV time, or you're playing in Hawaii when half the voters are asleep by the time your game kicks off, winning the Heisman becomes exponentially more difficult. Sure, if you play like a stud at a school like Ohio State or Michigan, where your games are constantly on television and where you're constantly in the limelight, you're going to be fine. But if you're playing at a school that does not get that exposure and might be lucky to get 2 plays from one of their games on SportsCenter in a highlight package, if that, because of the fact that the media votes on the Heisman, and because of the fact that the media controls the narrative with the Heisman, you might be in some trouble. So you've got to get a bit creative. And if a school thinks that their player has a good chance to win the Heisman, or at the very least, should be in consideration for the award, a lot of times, they'll go all out crafting a campaign to get it in the back of the mind of the voters that this player is good and deserves an invitation to New York to win college football's most prestigious award. Some schools will send voters goodies, like when Washington State sent voters a leaf with the name Ryan Leaf on it, to let people know that you should consider quarterback Ryan Leaf when voting. Some will send out brochures and flyers. Some will prominently display messages or buy advertisements in the newspaper, or they'll really push for it in their media guide. You get the idea. This becomes a marketing and an advertising game. And when it comes to that, the sky's the limit. And the only thing stopping you is your imagination. I'm not saying that a creative and a great campaign necessarily wins you the award, because even if Florida State last season bribed every voter with a golden yacht, DJU was still not going to win that award. But it doesn't hurt. Except for one time where it actually might have hurt. Because this man right here that you've been watching is Kentucky quarterback Tim Couch. And in 1998, he had what might just be the absolute worst Heisman campaign of all time. I'm not talking about his on-field play or production, because we're going to get to that in a second. And there's a reason that the Cleveland Browns decided to make him the first overall pick at the 1999 NFL Draft. I'm not talking about anything that he himself did. Rather, I'm talking about something that the school decided to do that, in trying to promote his Heisman campaign, might have derailed it overnight. And it's a story so absurd and so obvious to anyone with working brain cells that nearly 3 decades later, it deserves a deep dive today. Because this is the story behind Tim Couch in 1998, and what might just be the worst Heisman campaign of all time. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, hype up that video, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. Because we post frequently about the weird and the wacky history of college football with stories like this one that you may not have heard of before. So if you like that sort of stuff, then this is definitely the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing, and for hyping the video up, and for helping us grow this community. And with that in mind, let's talk about the time that Kentucky would have been better off just sitting on the couch instead of trying to help out Tim Couch. Before I break down what exactly Kentucky did and just how insane it was, we need some context to understand just who Tim Couch was, how good of a player he was, and why he was even in the running for the Heisman in the first place. The year is 1998, and there's one quarterback in college football that, at least from a statistical standpoint, seems head and shoulders above the rest. That man is Tim Couch, who was so good that, much like Shedeur Sanders, he got his number retired by the school, meaning that no one will ever wear the number 2 jersey again for the Wildcats. However, this one's pretty deserving. Couch is a college football Hall of Fame quarterback, and it's not hard to see why, as entering the 1998 season, a lot of people had high expectations for him, seeing as in 1997, he threw for 3,884 yards and 37 touchdowns, finishing first in the NCAA at the Division 1A level in yards and second in touchdowns, only behind Chad Pennington of Marshall. Couch also led all of Division 1A in completion percentage and finished inside the top 10 of the voting for the Heisman. And in 1998, not only was Couch picking up right where he left off, but he was even better. He was named an All-American. He improved his completion percentage, which was already ridiculously high, to 72.3%. He threw for 4,275 yards, which was second in Division 1A, only behind Tim Rattay of Louisiana Tech. He led all of Division 1A in completions, as he completed 400 passes, which, for some perspective, only 4 quarterbacks, including Couch, completed 300 passes that season, and only 6 quarterbacks, including Couch, completed 250 passes. And just to throw the cherry on top of an already great season from an individual standpoint, he once again finished second in Division 1A in passing touchdowns and first in the SEC in that category, following up his 37-touchdown season in 1997 with a 36-touchdown season in 1998. At this point in Kentucky's history, only one time did the Wildcats have a quarterback lead the conference in touchdown passes, which is when Rick Norton did it in 1964. Couch did it twice in back-to-back years. Yes, Tim Couch was a great player, and would have been a great player at any school who is still fondly remembered to this day. He's in the College Hall of Fame for a reason. But at Kentucky, where players like this were super uncommon, you can see why the man is a legend. So that was the good news for Tim Couch in 1998. He was putting up great numbers and was turning heads with everyone, from the fans, to the coaches, to the scouts, and everyone in between. The bad news was that Kentucky wasn't the best of teams. Even during that 1997 season, when he played his butt off, the Wildcats only went 5-6. And in 1998, Kentucky was 7-4 prior to their bowl game and was never ranked in the AP poll or the BCS poll, although they did receive votes on a handful of occasions. What that meant was that it was very easy for a school like Kentucky and a player like Tim Couch to slip under the radar, because if you were a voter for the Heisman who didn't live in state, you rarely got to see the man play. We were definitely improving in technology by the late 1990s, and we saw more games on television with the rise of pay-per-view, cable channels needing things to broadcast, and the heyday of ESPN in the eyes of many. But it's not like today, where if you want to watch every game of a specific school, you can, no questions asked. Kentucky had 2 games in 1997 that were on CBS, and 2 games that were on ESPN2. And that was it. They had some games on Jefferson Pilot, but that's more regionalized in the South and not national. And in 1998, it was more of the same, as Kentucky had 2 games on CBS and 3 games on ESPN2. Compare that to a team like Tennessee, who in 1998 had every game on television in some capacity and had a whopping 6 games on over-the-air channels like CBS, and it's like night and day. Even though Couch was a great player, he wasn't getting the exposure like a lot of other Heisman candidates were getting, simply because of the fact that he was rarely on television, or at least not to the level as a lot of these other schools. With that in mind, Kentucky officials decided it was a good idea to do what every other school was doing with any player in the Heisman race, and decide to launch a campaign for Tim Couch. If the voters weren't able to watch Tim Couch play, then we were going to bring Tim Couch playing to them. And folks, I think you might be able to see where this one is going, or at the very least, you can see what's about to transpire if you grew up or lived in the 90s. Because Rena Vicini, the sports information director at Kentucky, had the idea to send every reporter who had a vote for the Heisman an email that contained a downloadable 40-second video of Tim Couch highlights. Vicini got the idea for this at, of all places, a bar in New Jersey. As she was talking to this guy at the bar, as she said, the guy said this would be a great way to let people see the way Tim moves, how he evades tacklers. He's really poetry in motion. And remember, this was before the days of YouTube, so it's not like you could just send a link to a video sharing site and have them click on that. And in theory, this isn't a bad idea. If people can't necessarily watch Tim Couch play on a weekly basis, because his appearances on TV are a once-in-a-blue-moon thing, then giving them the ability to watch couch highlights seems like a good idea. Except for when you remember that this was 1998. Remember when Napster and LimeWire were all the rage and people were downloading music files off of those sites? Remember waiting for hours on end for it to download, or hitting the download button before you went to bed and waking up the next day because you knew it was going to take that long to download and you had to pray to God that it was the right file? The file size for that was somewhere around 3 megabytes. The file of this video? 5 whole megabytes. The average press release that an SID sends out to reporters so they can get stats and storylines and context for the game in hand is about 10,000 bytes. That's what you expect to open up when you open up your email. This was 500 times the size of what someone would expect to be getting from an SID, and was about double the size of your average Napster or LimeWire file. And it's not as if Bassini sent out an email to everyone saying beforehand, "Hey, I've got highlights of Tim Couch from his game on Saturday because it wasn't on television. So if you want to see them, let me know, and I'll send the file over either digitally or with a VHS tape or DVD." She just sent everyone 5 megabytes of video footage over an email. And because anyone with a brain in 1998 could understand how insane this was, especially for those reporters who had laptops, to the shock of absolutely no one, everyone's computer crashed. If you were a Heisman voter and you opened up this email on your laptop, or even on your home computer, congratulations. You are now completely and utterly screwed. Kentucky, for all intents and purposes, just sent you a virus. As one writer said, the couch video lodged in my email program like some massive hairball. It tried to download for 8 minutes before timing out. At that point, it was about 1/4 loaded. I couldn't get any email at all until I called my ISP the next day and had them manually remove the 5 meg monster, using the techno equivalent of a plumber's snake. And after sending the email to try and help out the man who'd been watching this whole time, it absolutely worked. If Rena Vicini wanted to get a response from the voters, mission accomplished. Mission accomplished, all right. However, it was not the response she was expecting, because what followed was reporter after reporter messaging her, blaming her crazy idea for crashing their computer system and for being unable to do any work or for having to get their computer repaired. Vicini was mortified about this, and obviously, she had no intention of trying to kill off every reporter's computer. She was trying to help out Couch, and in the process, absolutely hurt him and made reporters despise Kentucky for this insane campaign. As Vicini said, "I'm an old-timer, and I'm not technologically advanced." Understatement of the century right there. You don't say. She continued saying, "People wrote me and were saying, 'Don't ever, and I mean never, do this to me again.' I apologized to each and every one of them. I wanted them to know my intentions were good." And yes, the intentions were 100% good. But even the best laid plans of mice and men go awry. And just because you have good intentions doesn't mean that your plan is good. In fact, your plan might suck. And newsflash, this plan sucked. Vicini later said in retrospect, "After the first week, I got a few calls from people who couldn't download it. I clogged up a few computers." If by a few, you mean almost everyone, then yes, you clogged up a few computers. Vicini clogged up a few computers in the same way that Nick Saban won a few games at Alabama. Texas running back Ricky Williams won the Heisman that year after running for over 2,100 yards and 27 touchdowns, while almost single-handedly turning the Texas program around, taking them from a 4-7 team to a 9-3 team that finished inside the top 15 of the AP poll, while Tim Couch finished 4th. I'm not sure if he would have won the Heisman without this campaign. In fact, I'm pretty confident that he would still lose the Heisman to Williams. But this definitely didn't help matters. Alienating all of your voters by destroying their computers and making them unable to work because you had no idea that video files are large and take up space and take a while to download is a bold strategy, Cotton, and it did not pay off here. Obviously today, something like this wouldn't happen. Computers are faster and can hold more information. We have video services like YouTube, where if you want people to watch Tim Couch highlights, you just give them a link and they click on it without having to download anything. And they can watch it in crystal clear quality without having it take up any space on their computer. But in 1998, in an effort to make Tim Couch a household name for his play on the field, Kentucky made him a household name for off-the-field reasons, completely out of his control. Because when it came to this downloadable file, you can put this idea in the file of the worst ideas ever. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name at the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.